Hey everyone, Vincenzo Calla here, and welcome to Let's Discuss Politics. Today, I'm glad to be joined by the Ottawa City Councillor for Ward 19, Orléans South-Navan, Catherine Kitts. Thanks, Catherine, for joining me today.
Thanks so much for having me.
Well, it's so great to have you here, and before we start, I just want to make an update to the viewers to make sure that you're staying updated with me on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok at VC Productions 25. Check out vincenzocalla.com, my website, and make sure to like, subscribe, and get notifications here on YouTube. So without further ado, let's get this interview started. So our first segment is called Catherine's Story, where we'll talk a bit about who Catherine is and her political history. So first off, right off the bat, can you tell me a bit about yourself, your story, and how you got your start in politics?
Yeah, of course. So I'm a lifelong East End resident. I grew up in Orleans, and then I went to journalism school. And shortly after I graduated, I became the editor of the local paper for Orleans, the Orleans Star. And so it was at that time that I became really invested in all of the issues facing the East End at all levels of government, but I think specifically municipal because it touches your daily life. And running a local newspaper, I was always talking to the councillors, and Ottawa's been growing, and the East End has been growing. So it's been interesting to see that transformation. So then in 2018, a longtime councillor was retiring, had announced he wasn't running for re-election. And I was chatting with a friend of mine, and I'd always been a bit of a news junkie, and I said, I really hope whoever succeeds the councillor, has a really kind of progressive view of the city, because at the time there was all these sort of exciting projects in progress. We had Lansdowne had just opened. The LRT was coming. It hadn't opened yet. It's still exciting back then. We were still talking about moving the senators downtown, the original LeBreton proposal. And so I said, I hope all these, really great city building projects continue. And, it'd be so great to see more women on council, because at the time there was only 4 women out of 24 members of council. And it would be cool to see somebody young. Anyways, and as I'm talking, my friend of mine says, Catherine, you should run. So I kind of did it a bit spontaneously, and I had never been involved in politics. I'd never run volunteered on a political campaign. So I got my friends together and we just, started knocking on doors. And in that election, there were 17 people running for the seat. And I ended up coming second. I lost by 264 votes to my now colleague, Matthew Lulov. And so I was so proud of my run, even though I lost. I was like, wow, I came second out of 17 people. And I thought it was a really great experience. Shortly after, I moved into a different ward, the neighboring ward. And then right after I moved, the councillor for that area announced he was running for provincial politics. And so there was going to be a by-election. And right away, my phone started ringing. People from the community saying, you need to run. You came so close. You live here now. And the issues are so similar because it's still the East End. So, please consider running. And so I did. It was in the middle of the pandemic. So it was a very strange by-election. And I got elected that time. There was 10 candidates, and I won with 54% of the vote. And then I just won re-election this October. So that's how I got to City Hall.
Well, definitely an interesting story there. And, there's been a couple, like I said, with Mayor Mark Sutcliffe a couple of weeks ago, there's been a couple of people that have joined me on the show that have made the jump from journalism to politics. And I want to ask you about that right now. So my question is usually, why did you decide to run for the position you hold? And maybe talk a bit about that jump from being a journalist into politics.
Yeah, well, as I was saying, I was really interested in the local issues. And municipal government is the one that kind of touches your daily life the most. Whenever I'm talking, sometimes I get invited to talk to schools, like elementary schools, and I say, you wake up in the morning, you turn your tap on to brush your teeth. That's the city of Ottawa. Maybe you help your parents put the recycling at the end of the driveway. That's the city of Ottawa. And then you commute to go to school, whether you're, biking or walking or taking the school bus, that's the city of Ottawa. So, political person, a very partisan person. So I like too that at the municipal level, you have that autonomy. You're not tied to a party, you're just making decisions on behalf of your community. So that was always really attractive to me as well. And I think the skills that I have acquired as a journalist really help with being a politician, because I see one of my biggest responsibilities is to be a good communicator. So, I'm hearing what my community needs, and I'm communicating back to council what those needs are. And then at council, I'm taking the information that we discuss and I'm communicating it back to my community. So I think, being someone who is who enjoys research, well researched, who can ask tough questions, can, always be sort of on the pursuit of truth. And, again, be a good communicator, I think has really served me well in this role.
So we're going to go on to the next segment now, which is called Serving as an Elected Official, where we'll talk a bit about your experiences and achievements over the past few years as the councillor. So first off, I always like to start local. What's your favorite part about serving your community as their councillor?
Well, I think it's just that. I think it's, this incredible honor of serving my community and being the voice of my neighbors. I think, I think that's an incredible honor. It's a responsibility that I don't take lightly. And, being in this position, you get to meet and, get to know so many different people from all walks of life. And I think that's probably my favorite part, is that interaction with the community. And it was challenging when I first got elected, again, because it was in the midst of the pandemic. So my interaction with the community was limited, definitely face to face. It was limited. I was mainly communicating with people in virtual meetings, or, via email or the phone. So it's really nice to be able to be back out in the community, doing those fun community events, meeting with people face to face. It's definitely where I get my energy from.
So now I wanted to ask you, what has been your favorite achievement? Or I know you've probably done a lot over the past 4 or 5 years. So what have been some of your favorite achievements as an elected official?
Yeah, well, I just got elected in 2020, so it's only been
Yeah.
2 years and a bit.
Ah,
But
sorry for
one of
my
my
math. My math
that's
is
okay.
wrong.
Sometimes it feels like it's been 5 years.
Since 2020,
Um,
yeah.
but no, one example that I love, or one achievement that I'm especially proud of, is when I was first elected, there was the community came to me because there's a forest, an urban forest in Avalon, the Lalonde Conservation Park, and it was privately owned by a developer, but the community had been using it for years. There's some trails through there, so to walk their dogs or just to have like a little escape in nature. And the developer had an application to build homes, and we were going to lose part of the forest because the city didn't have the money to purchase the entire forest. So the community was really upset about this, and it was presented to me like a done deal. Like, it's already the approval's already gone through. It's kind of all said and done. And so I had to think a little bit creatively. And so I approached the city's corporate real estate team and I said, is there any land that the city owns that we could look at making a trade? So we could, trade the land so the developer could still build what they want to build in a different location. And as the city, we could swap it for this forest and it could become parkland and, be saved in perpetuity. So every time this sort of advanced, like the corporate real estate office said, yeah, sure, we'll take a look at it. And then I approached the developer and I said, if I had a piece of land for you to consider, would you look at it? And they said, okay, sure. And then I, got the community on board. And every time it passed a hurdle, I thought, wow, this might actually work. And so, it was a great collaboration with the community association, with the applicant, with the city, and we were able to make it happen. So we did end up swapping them a piece of land. The forest is officially saved, and the developer is still going to be able to build the homes that they want to build in a location that's more appropriate. So just kind of a win-win for everybody. And I think it really speaks to my approach as a councillor. I like to be really collaborative. think outside the box, kind of to challenge expectations sometimes. So that's what I'm really proud of.
And before we go on to the last segment now, I wanted to ask you a bit. So last month we saw the explosion in your
Yeah,
riding or in your constituency. Sorry, I'm thinking federal, but see your community. So
yeah,
you stepped up during that
thank you.
situation and you served your community. What was that like stepping up? It was early morning. It was like I don't know what time, early in the morning, and your community was rocked by this. What was that like?
Yeah, I think you can never really prepare to witness something like that in your community and have your neighbors, so heavily impacted. But yeah, it was very early in the morning. It was, I had just kind of made my coffee, was starting to get my day going, and I got a text message from a friend of mine who lives about 8 kilometers from where the explosion happened, and she said something just happened, the whole house shook. And she lives in a developing neighborhood as well. And so I said, okay, like I'll look into it, but I wasn't really worried. 5 minutes later, she said, there's 100 fire trucks coming down Innes Road. And so I went to Twitter anyways. I ended up seeing the doorbell camera footage of the explosion, and my heart, just kind of leapt out of my chest. So immediately I got on the phone. I knew it was a Minto site, so I, wanted to contact them to make sure their workers were accounted for. I was in touch with fire services. They said, why don't you come down here because the information is going to change minute to minute. So from then on, I was kind of embedded with the command center. And from my perspective, I just wanted to make sure once we knew that everybody was accounted for, we knew that there was going to be families that were displaced. And I wanted to make sure that they had the supports that they need and they had somewhere to go. So, we were working with our partners at the Red Cross and Salvation Army, and our city partners as well, just to make sure that all those families were taken care of. And again, communication, giving them the latest information, and just having them know that I was someone that was looking out for their best interests and that they could, trust me to try and get the information that they were looking for. So thankfully, nobody was killed in that incident. I think it's a bit of a miracle, just given how incredible the explosion was. But it was a difficult incident, a challenging incident that's impacted a lot of people, and you never want to see something like that to happen in your community. So
Definitely, and it's an important part of serving your community, sort of making sure that communication is there and helping those that need the help. And in that situation was one of them for sure.
yeah, absolutely.
So we're going to go into the last segment now, which is called The World of Politics Around Us, where we'll talk about this world of politics that surrounds us. So first off, I wanted to ask who is or who was another politician that inspires you as a counselor?
Yeah, so Jacinda Ardern, who was the Prime Minister of New Zealand, I remember, seeing her go through the horrific incident at Christchurch and how she handled that. And I actually, when I got elected, my girlfriends, I'd grab it, I can show it to you, but they framed a quote from her to put in my office because it's really my political ethos. And it says, I'm paraphrasing, but I really rebel against this idea that politics has to be a place where you're constantly focused on scoring hits against each other. You can be strong and you can be kind. And when I joined City Council, it was a very fractious council in 2020. I would classify it as a toxic environment. People were really not getting along. And I refused to kind of get into that and sort of pick sides and contribute to the negativity. I always want to have an open door policy. I always try my best to get along with all my colleagues, and it doesn't mean we're going to agree on every issue, but we can respect each other's opinion and we can work collaboratively in the best interests of the residents of Ottawa. And that's really what I come down to. So that quote has always really resonated with me. I thought she was such a empathetic, strong leader, someone who was not afraid to do it her own way. And of course, a younger woman in politics, which is a huge inspiration for me as well. So she just recently announced she won't be running for re-election. I was sad to see that because she's been such a great leader. But I think too, having the humility to know, when it's time to step down also speaks to her character. So major motivation for me.
Definitely, and some important messages there, looking at the side of politics that is human, because there are
Mhm.
humans and we're all in this and working and sort of looking at that and looking to inspirational leaders like that to sort of guide pathways and go on like that. So
Absolutely.
we're going to go on to the last question now, which is my favorite one always to ask because we always get so much talked about in this question, which is what do you think is an issue or some issues that need to be focused on more, that you'd like to focus on more and just generally should be focused on more?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, I think as a city, we're really trying to tackle the housing and homelessness crisis. Ottawa is growing very rapidly. We are projected to grow to 1.4 million by 2046, and we're just over a million right now. So, in the next less than 25 years to grow by 400,000 people is incredibly significant. And we need places for those people to go. We need homes for them. And so again, going back to what I was saying about my sort of way of collaborating with all partners. I'm in a very high growth area. We've got a lot of development. It can be very challenging to manage because you've got existing um, homes and neighborhoods, and you want to keep the character of those neighborhoods, but at the same time, accommodate for this rapid growth. So that the conflict between development and infrastructure is something that we're battling in Ward 19. But I think as a city, again, as someone who's lived here my entire life, we have to be ready to grow and to become we've always been kind of a small big city, but we're becoming a big city, and there's a lot of change that comes with that, whether it's our public transit system, our responsibility environmentally and our climate change goals. We're tackling really sort of big issues as a city right now, and I think being part of that change is exciting, but it can also be challenging to be, a leader when you're going through such a transitional time.
Well, definitely, and like you said, Ottawa has always been sort of the smaller big city. We're at a million now
Mhm.
and we're continuing our growth, and I would say that's a good thing because we're
Mm.
quite a close city and we know what's going on in our city for the most part, and everybody, well, I'm not going to make a sweeping statement like everybody gets along, but we're a good community. We have a nice community in Ottawa throughout the city, and making sure that as we grow, we continue to grow along with it and build houses and work on what's important and expand our LRT and the busing
Yeah,
and all that. There's just so much we could talk about, but another
for sure.
conversation for another day.
Absolutely.
So that's all for today. Thank you, Catherine, so much for joining me.
Thank you.
Well, it was so great having you. And if you like this interview, make sure to go check out the other part with Catherine on YouTube for top 10. If you're watching this at the date of the premiere, it's going to be coming out on Friday. So Let's Discuss Politics is a VCalla production. So until the next video, I'm Vincenzo Calla, signing out.